Tonight, the Trump-era Title 42 immigration policy officially over.
The challenge at the border is and is going to be very difficult.
What lies ahead as mass amounts of migrants make their way to America seeking asylum. Plus,
I can't do this.
The growing problem of sex trafficking at the southern border.
It's almost easier to order a human being than it is a piece of pizza at this point.
And
we found a number of things that changed in terms of their views of truth, their views about God.
How the COVID-19 pandemic changed religion in America. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. A new era for immigration at the southern border. Good evening in Washington, I'm Jenna Browder. Title 42 is no longer, and with that, there's growing concern over a migrant surge at the southern border. So much so, some cities have declared states of emergency. CBN's Matt Galga has more on the fallout now that the COVID-era immigration policy is expired. Matt?
Well, Jenna, border counties in South Texas issued some of those disaster declarations you just mentioned. The president said earlier this week that things at the border would be, quote, chaotic for a while now that Title 42 has expired. Border Patrol had a record number of daily encounters this week, with at least 2 days seeing 10,000 migrant apprehensions. Republicans have continued to hammer away at the administration for its failure to prepare for a potential surge.
President Biden took the oath of office, he pretty much welcomed people in, and then he assigns Kamala Harris to be the border czar. Where has she been in all this? Haven't heard hide nor hair of her. And so we have the Texas National Guard, the Texas DPS down there on the border doing the job, really, that the federal government should be doing.
And at least some of the border crossing spots remain relatively calm today after more chaotic scenes earlier in the week where migrants scrambled to get into the country and claim asylum.
Matt, so what happens now? Are there any new measures in place?
Well, at least one new rule from the Biden administration went into effect last night. It only allows people to claim asylum at the border if they applied for it in a country they passed through on their way to America. They cannot claim asylum if they didn't already apply.
The president has done three things that I think should help. One, he has a process of humanitarian parole. That means if you're coming from Cuba or Venezuela, you have to go to the process. You can't just show up at the border. Two, he's had regional centers. Three, he said you've got to file for asylum in the first country after you leave. You just can't come to the United States. If you don't file there, you'll be denied. And if people are coming without legitimate claims, they need to be sent back.
Now, the State Department plans to open up 100 new processing centers for resettlement. They're also trying to make it easier for migrants at the border to make an asylum appointment before crossing using an app. And they're rolling out a tracking program for people waiting on their court date if they're already in the United States. But a federal judge in Florida did block part of Biden's plan to parole some migrants without a notice to appear because Border Patrol can't handle the influx at the border. It's a very complicated situation, and it remains to be seen if these measures can help stop a potential humanitarian crisis that people in border towns and the elected officials who represent them have been warning about. Jenna?
All right, Matt, thank you very much. Well, with the expiration of Title 42 and the growing number of migrants at the border, there's a renewed push on Capitol Hill to fight human trafficking.
I do believe this is a pivotal time to be focused on human trafficking as U.S. faces a crisis at our southern border that has resulted in countless victims, especially women and children, being exploited, while traffickers take advantage of the chaos. With the expiration of Title 42 last night,
New Jersey Republican Congressman Chris Smith was the lead sponsor of the Trafficking and Violence Protection Act of 2000, a bill that was signed into law by President Clinton. Smith says now more than ever, action is needed.
most countries in the world have responded to this gross violation of human rights and have enacted anti-trafficking legislation. Yet there is more that must be done to strengthen the U.S. and international response to these crimes, as more than 27 million people are still, and the estimates vary, but are still being trafficked today.
In America, about 20% of sex trafficking victims pass through Texas. And one small-town sheriff's office has a strong message to those behind the crime. Not in our backyard. Police are aggressively enforcing state laws that make buying sex a felony. Tara Mergener rode along with Texas Sheriff's deputies to bring us this story and a warning. Some of what you're about to see is disturbing.
Texas is the first state in the country to make buying sex a felony. It's a crime that can be easy to miss unless you know what you're looking for, with the victim often punished too. But not here in McLennan County, where a sheriff's office detective is changing the game.
Sex trafficking often conjures up images of big city crime committed quietly under the cover of darkness. But it's happening in small towns too.
It's almost easier to order a human being than it is a piece of pizza at this point.
Often in plain sight.
We keep the heat turned up and hammer down on them.
Put your hand up now, smoke your.
McLennan County sits between Dallas and Austin.
Is this a case where don't mess with Texas applies?
Don't mess with Texas, yes, especially Central Texas.
With a sheriff's office in Waco making sex for sale risky business.
We'll see very often where they're saying don't go to Waco because you run the risk of getting caught. So we're just going to one of the local motels. We got a text message from a guy who found the sex ad we had posted.
Since launching a human trafficking task force in 2014, Detective Joe Scaramucci's two-man team has been using internet savvy and a finely tuned ground game to round up hundreds of suspects.
We target traffickers, we target buyers.
Routinely outpacing larger law enforcement agencies.
Slide on out here for me, guy. Put the phone down.
I haven't seen one yet that's presented a reason why we're like, oh, yeah, we're not going to arrest you. What's your rank in the military?
Sergeant.
Hey, you even got love notes from your wife and your lunch kit.
Yeah. I can't do this. Please, I have to go home.
If we can take the buyers out, then we can also kind of decrease the amount of trafficking. Most of the time, law enforcement isn't doing that. 10-4, en route to the jail.
Regular stings include Scaramucci posing online as a sex worker to lure buyers looking for a tryst.
So I'm telling him for a half hour to engage in full sexual intercourse is $140.
Even if you don't show up, chances are we're able to work it backwards and get an arrest warrant and go pick you up.
Hey, what's up, man? It's a felony.
It's a felony? I have to tell you something.
What?
I just got arrested.
No, that is not what happened.
Several sex buyers have been picked up right here just in the last few days. All are taken straight to jail. As of September 1, it's a felony.
Yeah. Yep, go right over here.
You know that paying for sex
No,
is
it is
illegal.
very illegal, yes.
Do you know it's a felony in Texas?
I did not know that.
What? When we get in there, I'll take them off.
Does it ever shock you how young some of these people are?
It's heartbreaking that 18-year-old, 19 and 20-year-old kids are showing up doing this kind of stuff. Law enforcement is currently unjustly targeting women.
Scaramucci is the only officer who testified in support of Texas's new law cracking down on predators and shifting blame away from victims.
So this website aggregates sex ads just from all over the internet.
Ads selling the same woman across state lines, tattoos consistent with prostitution, and photos other than selfies are telltale signs. The majority of victims are female, lured into prostitution.
And then there's a girl that I've been watching for a while.
This one features an X-rated video with a man Scaramucci believes is her pimp. Quick detective work reveals the two are at a nearby motel.
When are y'all hop in with me real fast?
Should we change your locations?
We catch up with them at a gas station. His young family is along for the ride. The woman who says she's addicted to meth confirms he's been selling her since they met and keeping the money.
She was homeless. He found her at a local intersection walking down the street, picked her up, gave her a place to stay. What is mega personals?
But like other women snared in Scaramucci's bus, she'll get help, not jail time.
This is gonna go as well.
Most of the women that we rescue don't want to be prostitutes. They get pushed into it or lured into it by the traffickers. These people are slick.
On standby are members of Unbound Now, which recently opened the state's second safe house for girls.
Help get the medical, food, shelter, just walk with them and then do case management.
When the unit shut down massage parlors in the county a few years ago,
another Waco massage parlor has been raided.
Not one sex worker faced charges.
They feed you drugs. You give them their money, they make sure you have your drugs, and nobody gets hurt.
Traffickers prey on people of all ages and backgrounds.
Befriending and then trying to figure out what.
Not only is McLennan's no-nonsense approach to the problem getting media recognition and prestigious awards, international law enforcement agencies are reaching out to learn from its success.
It's a cat and mouse game. You're trying to duck me, I'm trying to find you. And we got to get help for a victim of trafficking, right? So that's a huge success on our part.
Still, the work is daunting.
If you can get that one sexual deviant that is hitting up the 12-year-old girl, there's going to be 10, 20, 30 more behind them.
In Texas alone, tens of thousands of victims are minors, many peddled through the darkest corners of the internet.
Yeah, my name's Joe Scaramucci. I'm a detective with the Sheriff's Office in Waco, Texas.
This time, the trail leads to a retail employee in another state.
Well, the problem is I have your IP address. That's why I'm contacting you.
Especially troubling to law enforcement is the rising number of parents willing to sell their own children to predators.
It says 65 notifications.
When Scaramucci enters a chat room claiming to be a father of two, willing to make a deal, the phone lights up.
And these are from people wanting to have sex with kids?
These are for people wanting to engage in sex with kids or trade child pornography.
We're able to identify those children in many cases and get them help that they would have never had help with anyway.
Recovery from being trafficked is difficult. Their life has really been robbed from them through a lot of complex trauma.
Survival rates for any age are low, with an average life expectancy just 7 years. While keeping as many as possible from becoming a statistic, Scaramucci hopes this message will spread, not in my backyard.
Community members, get loud, right? Tell your police department or your sheriff's office, we know what's going on here. What are you doing to combat it?
An online sting operation.
A prostitution sting in Waco has landed 17 people in jail.
Clinton County Sheriff's Office arrested 15 men.
And they plan to keep those efforts going to eradicate human trafficking in the community.
Soliciting prostitution in Texas carries a maximum $10,000 fine and up to 2 years behind bars. A number of states are also weighing strengthening their laws now as well. In McLennan County, Texas, I'm Tara Mergener, CBN News.
Thank you, Tara. A delay in debt ceiling talks as the clock ticks down. What's next? That story and more when Faith Nation returns. Welcome back. A planned debt ceiling meeting between the White House and congressional leaders was delayed today, giving more time for administration officials and congressional staff to negotiate a deal. They're working against a June deadline before the U.S. may not be able to pay its bills. Democrats want a clean debt ceiling increase, but many Republicans say they won't raise the limit unless there are also spending cuts. And with that, let's bring in CBN News Chief Political Analyst David Brody. So, David, we're 3 weeks still a good amount of time. Do you think we're in danger of a default, or will a deal get done?
Well, I think technically we're in danger, but this feels like Groundhog Day to me. I mean, this feels like a situation like, wait, I've seen this script written before, right? Debt ceiling danger, wah, 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 it's solved. And that's how it gets. It happens every single year. You know, Jenna, you've covered it. I've covered it. Democrats are in a position right now where they've got a deal because if indeed America does default, that's going to be on Democrats because they're in leadership. So Republicans are trying to get everything they possibly can out of this. And my guess is there will be some spending cuts ultimately, and a deal will be had.
Yeah, in a CNN town hall this week, former President Trump said Republicans should let the country default if they don't get their big spending cuts. And then many Republicans in the Senate shot down that idea pretty quickly, David. Is there a big disconnect between Trump and members of his party on this issue?
Well, I don't know if it's a disconnect. I guess technically it's a disconnect because Trump isn't president. He's candidate Trump right now. But even Trump admitted, this is so Trump, I'm laughing because it's so blatantly like honest, which is where he said, If I was president, I'd probably think differently about it. I mean, because he's right. Because he knows as a president of the United States, you just can't default. You just can't. But as a candidate, he can say something differently. And people will be like, really? Where's the morality in that? But the truth of the matter is, I don't think it's a disconnect between Republicans and the president, or excuse me, Trump. I think it's just a situation where Trump knows that ultimately a deal will be made ultimately here.
Yeah. David, right now all eyes are on the southern border. We're waiting to see what happens now that Title 42 is ended. Is this a defining moment for the Biden administration?
It is. I think looking back, not to get into Afghanistan, but I think that was the defining moment for the Biden administration. I think that's where his polls started to crater. But immigration is going to be right alongside Afghanistan. This is bad for Biden. All polls suggest this is bad. I mean, you've got more than 50%, about 52% of Americans not wanting Title 42 to end. And Title 42 is ending. And now we're going to be up to about 10,000, 12,000 illegal immigrants a day coming into America. This is just disastrous for Biden politically and really for the country. And don't take my word for it. That's not analysis. That's just facts from Americans on the ground.
Yeah. All right, David, it's always good to see you. Thank you for coming on tonight.
You bet. Thanks, Jen.
Have a great weekend. And coming up, the spiritual impact of the pandemic and the future of faith in America. Stay tuned. Well, troubling new numbers for the Southern Baptist Convention. The denomination's membership was down nearly 500,000 in 2022. That's the largest drop in membership in a century. The numbers come from a report released by Lifeway Christian Resources. According to Lifeway, total SBC membership went from about 13.7 million in 2021 to 13.2 million in 2022. Lifeway points to a host of reasons, including the COVID-19 pandemic and older members dying off. The SBC has also faced several crises in recent years, including a major sex abuse scandal, controversies over race, and ongoing feuds over the denomination's leadership and future direction. The pandemic had devastating effects on education, healthcare, and trust in our public institutions. It also took a toll on Americans' attitudes towards faith. CBN's Billy Hollowell shares both warnings and strategies on how to combat a diminishing biblical worldview.
A new survey reveals the stunning impact COVID-19 had on Americans' religious perspectives. The percentage with a biblical worldview has plummeted to just 4%. Dr. George Barna, director of the Cultural Research Center, finds the results of the American Worldview Inventory report alarming.
First of all, much more extensive than we actually expected. Typically, you don't find that religious beliefs change very much. They're probably the most stable of the factors in a person's life, because they relate to worldview that's formed when you're young and it doesn't change much as you age.
Dr. Barna adds that crisis moments like the pandemic can also spark surprising shifts.
We found a number of things that changed in terms of their views of truth, their views about God, their own assessment of their spiritual commitment, some of their moral perspectives, going to church, reading the Bible, acknowledging their sins and asking for forgiveness. Those kinds of things all shifted pretty dramatically.
And the changes aren't limited to the secular world. Only 44% of born-again Christians believe Jesus didn't commit any sins during his life on earth, down from 58% in 2020. And the percentage of those who see a God-given calling or purpose for their lives declined by almost half, from 88% to 46%.
We've really got to sit back and think intelligently and strategically about what are we doing in reference to worldview. As we look at that, what we find is parents are doing next to nothing intentionally. Churches are doing next to nothing intentionally. And so what's happening is that every child is out there as a free moral agent trying to figure out the world. And I say child because a person's worldview is almost fully formed by the age of 13. So it's really with children that we have to focus on what are we going to do to develop that worldview.
Digital evangelist Matt Brown, founder of Think Eternity, agrees.
We need to do the things that Jesus told us to do now more than ever, because there's just never been a time that's more important that we preach the gospel, that we share the message of Jesus with the people around us, that we disciple the next generation. It's so important that we give the next generation a biblical worldview.
Dr. Barna believes church closures during the pandemic and other policies left people shaken up and confused. Still, despite the dire numbers, hope remains.
I think we've still got a little bit of a window of opportunity here where people are trying to figure some things out. This would be a great time for disciple makers to say, you know what? I'm going to start speaking to these issues that are on the minds and hearts of people today. I'm not going to go into esoteric theological conversations. I've got to deal with what people are really wrestling with.
And while the situation might seem sobering or even insurmountable, Brown says starting small and clinging to truth can make all the difference. Billy Hollowell, CBN News.
Celebrating moms across America. We'll be right back with that after this. Finally tonight, this Sunday is Mother's Day, and across the country, people are already marking the occasion. The president today issuing a proclamation saying, quote, "At family gatherings across America, let us give thanks for all of the mothers and mother figures who we love so much. Let us be sure to make the most of our precious time together. Let us all also keep in our prayers those who observe this day with a hole in their heart, missing a mom's irreplaceable presence, as well as the mothers who know the pain of losing a child. And finally, let us continue working to extend our country's promise of dignity and opportunity to America's mothers." And in Chicago, the day is being celebrated with special makeovers. Take a look at this. The Chicago Housing Authority partnered with the Women's Empowerment Daisy Foundation, honoring nearly 200 moms with free makeup, hairstyling, and a special photo session. For many of these moms, they say this kind of special treatment was a first, and they look fantastic, so well deserved. And for all of the moms out there, from all of us at Faith Nation, happy Mother's Day. Thank you for all that you do, and we hope you have a great weekend. Take care.